Let's be real here, the Nintendo Switch has one of the best libraries of any gaming console, almost 4 years into its cycle. This includes plenty of first-party exclusives as well as some excellent third-party ports, a plethora of indie hits, and of course, revisitations of past Nintendo hits. The Wii U era had a bad go at it, and so with this new, more successful generation, many of the best games from the system have migrated over to the Switch, often with significant enhancements. Super Mario 3D World in Bowser's Fury is certainly the most shining example of this. It is commonly referred to as the best game from the Wii U, and here on Switch it comes with some solid quality of life improvements and a brand new expansion. But, does it deliver? In short, for the most part. Before I get into Bowser's Fury, let's talk about the port. I played Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U, but I never beat it, so this was my first true foray into the majestic Sprixie Kingdom. However, I'm pretty sure Odyssey is the only Mario game I've ever beaten before this. Boy, I have commitment issues. Let me be clear, this is the absolute best way to play 3D World. Overall, the experience is much the same, but with some much appreciated tweaks. Perhaps the biggest diversion from the original is that the movement speed is dramatically increased from the Wii U version. While you did get used to it, the original 3D World definitely felt like a slog sometimes if you were not running around, which was fine for more precise moments, but not so much when you're rushing to get through an area. Here, you move much faster, allowing for a more momentous playthrough while still allowing for precision while needed. Then, they've refined the touch controls originally used by the Wii U gamepad. If playing in handheld mode, the controls are the same, but if docked, they instead use the built-in gyroscope to let you trigger certain things in the environment, which is very much appreciated. Finally, they've added snapshot mode, as photo modes are all the rage nowadays, and so now you can take some crisp, mustache-filled photos to your heart's content. In terms of performance, the game runs perfectly fine, which is no surprise as a Nintendo first-party game, but there's actually some pretty interesting stuff going on here to talk about. I played the game almost exclusively in handheld mode, which I felt was the best place to play, but on docked it actually runs at a varied resolution versus a native 1080p. Most of the time it hits that sweet spot, but it can drop down towards 720p depending on the situation. In handheld, it's a native 720p. For both modes, it's a locked 60 FPS, no issues there. What's curious about the performance here is that for a 2013 game, apparently the Switch can't necessarily handle running it at native 1080p. The Wii U version ran at 720, so there is an upgrade, although visual assets are practically identical, but it really speaks to the capabilities of the now aging hardware. Of course, having that smooth frame rate is always preferred, but it just makes those Switch Pro rumors all the more tantalizing. Curiosity aside, the game still looks absolutely gorgeous. It's Nintendo, what do you expect? On the gameplay side of things, 3D World is one of the best Mario games ever made. The amount of creativity in the project is, in my opinion, completely unmatched by any of Nintendo's other products. There are so many unique and interesting twists to the genre that had already been overwhelmingly done for decades, in ways that it seems only Nintendo can figure out. If I had one notable fault with the game, I'd say it doesn't really follow the world structure it attempts to emulate from previous games. While there are most certainly worlds in the game, instead of following an environmental theme, the majority of levels just sort of do their own thing. They're pretty much all phenomenal, so I really don't care, but it is kind of making the world setup useless beyond each having a castle at the end. Like any Mario game, it has plenty of content to keep you invested, no matter what type of fan you are. For completionists, there's perhaps more post-game content than any Mario game ever. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like I'm right. There's a ton of really cool stuff to do after you roll credits, so you really do get your money's worth here, and that's excluding Bowser's Fury. Speaking of, let's talk about that thing. Bowser's Fury is a tech demo. Everybody's saying it, they've got to be right. Even Nintendo could not have thought, hey, what if new content for 3D World was if that and Odyssey had a baby? That's exactly what this is, but it feels much more like, how should we follow up Odyssey? Well, let's see how this does by throwing it in here and making everything cats. The story follows a ginormous, corrupted Bowser terrorizing an area of islands, and Mario and, of all people, Bowser Jr. team up to defeat him. For starters, Bowser's Fury completely abandons 3D World's 4-player co-op experience for a 2-player one. Again, more of a mix of that and Odyssey's multiplayer than a straight continuation of it. Another player can take on the role of Bowser Jr., otherwise he is an AI companion that can be set to help you a little, or a lot, or not at all. Props to them for adding those options, BTW. Also, the camera is completely bound to the right stick, giving you full control unlike the main game, and more like its true 3D platforming counterparts, such as Odyssey. If not for all of the cat paraphernalia, this would have absolutely no semblance to 3D World, so I really highly doubt it started off as DLC. Performance here is not as stellar as its other side, but it makes sense. In docked mode, the game runs for the most part at 720p, although it is varied as well, with some occasional higher pixel counts. Portable again runs at 720, but this time at the cost of frame rate. Instead of 60 FPS, the game runs at 30 on handheld, one of the few, if only, times Nintendo has preferred visual quality over performance. It runs pretty much locked, save for a couple very small dips traveling to new areas, presumably as assets load, but compared to everything else running at 60 FPS, it's a shame. Over on the dock side of things, when things get chaotic, particularly during Bowser's appearances, the frame rate makes some pretty consistent dips, although nothing too severe. This is yet another interesting case for the Switch hardware, as we're seeing signs that even games optimized for the system are reaching their limit on the components. While financially speaking, the Switch is doing just fine on the market, but developers' ambition may convince Nintendo execs to speed along that Pro iteration. The first hour of the experience is a complete delight. Similar again to Odyssey, you freely explore small islands collecting cat shines in order to fight back against Fury Bowser. Where the game goes somewhere new is that every few minutes, Bowser appears and the world becomes much more chaotic. Fire rains down, Bowser tries to attack you, and the only way to quell his thirst for your coins is to collect another cat shrine to light a lighthouse and scare him away. Speaking of coins, there are also no lives here. If you die, you simply lose 50 coins. When you get 100 coins, you get a power-up, in which not only can you store one power-up, you can store 5 of each. It's a really convenient way to play, and it felt like an iterative step forward versus a crutch. It also helped with puzzle solving. Some areas of the map are much easier to access with the catsuit, so having one at the ready to plop on, then switch to a Tanuki outfit once you reach the summit, is really sweet. Another way to fight against Bowser is to, well, fight him. At certain points in the game, you will gain access to the Gigabell, a power-up that essentially makes you Mega Goku Mario. You're basically a huge version of Cat Mario, but I'd like to think this was clearly a mixed inspiration of anime, Godzilla, and Gigantamax Pokemon. Here, the fights operate like typical boss battles in the Mario universe, although you have access to the island areas you've explored thus far, meaning you can use them for cover, something not usually involved in Mario boss fights, and was welcome. Also, the soundtrack is absolutely bangin'. Composers Daisuke Matsuoka and James Phillipson took on the reins for this expansion, and following in the footsteps of the already phenomenal score of 3D World is no easy feat, and I'm sure came with a lot of pressure. But these folks did an incredible job here, creating melodic tones that completely fit the world built here, as well as providing fresh new sounds to get stuck in your head just like any other Mario game. Well done, gentlemen. I know there's a lot here that's good, and it really is, but the biggest problem with this expansion is that it refused to stop. Unlike its Odyssey inspiration, instead of being able to pretty consistently explore new areas, the game recycles its areas and makes you repeat them in slightly different ways multiple times to progress. Some of them are fun and inventive, but others are simply checking off a box. It's very repetitive and sluggish compared to its supposed main game, 3D World. It's sad because it really got off to a great start, but it's as if the developers were worried people would scoff at an hour-long DLC, so they stretched it as far as they could with the assets they had. There's honestly a fair amount of areas in the game. I just got tired of them after having to revisit them for the 5th time in order to access the Gigabell for the 4th time to fight Bowser in a slightly different way than the last 3 times. Overall, if you haven't played Super Mario 3D World, this game is a must-own. It's an amazing 3D platformer that has some of the most unique gameplay elements I have ever seen in a video game, and Nintendo's charm knows no bounds. For those simply looking to try out the new expansion, however, while it does have its fun, iterative ideas, it simply is a glorified, bloated concept idea that got shoehorned into this otherwise stellar release. Let me know what you guys thought of Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury down in the comments. Like if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys next time for whatever it is I'm doing. Alright, see ya.